Hello, dear fans of Scandinavian ancient and medieval history. This is your host Irina. Today I'll be presenting to you an incredible treasure. The Flateyjarbók, or in the modern pronunciation Flateyjarbók, manuscript GKS 1005 folio, is the largest of all Icelandic parchment books. That is 202 pages written at the end of the 14th century, with 23 pages that were added to the book in the second half of the 15th century. It is now bound in 2 volumes. Flateyjarbók is unique in that it tells us more about its origin than other medieval Icelandic manuscripts, about which we have almost no knowledge of their scribes or the time of writing. In the preface, it says that the book is owned by Jón Hákonarson and that it was written by priests Jón Þórðarson and Magnus Þórhallsson, and that the latter illustrated it all. Jón Hákonarson, born in 1350, was a wealthy farmer who lived in Víðidalstunga in Húnavatn county, but little is known about the 2 scribes. In another place in the book, Magnus Þórhallsson says that it was written in 1387, but he added something to it over the next 7 years. It is not known with certainty about the history of Flateyjarbók until after Jón Hákonarson passed away. Yet in the second half of the 15th century, the book must have been owned by Thorleif Björnsson, herdsman at Reykhólar, and he must have added to it the 23 pages that are more recent. Now, afterwards, Thorleif Björnsson's grandson, Jón Björnsson from Flatey, is the first documented person to have owned the Flateyjarbók after the days of Jón Hákonarson, but Jón Björnsson gave it to his grandson Jón Finnsson, who also lived in Flatey, and the book is named after the father and the son's home. It was then given as a present from Bishop Brynjolfur to King Frederick III of Denmark in 1656, after the bishop convinced Jón to sell it. The main content of Flateyjarbók is stories about Norwegian kings. In the first part, the most comprehensive are Olaf's saga Tryggvasonar, so the saga of Olaf Tryggvason, a special type of saga that is called Inmesta, and Olaf's saga Helga, the saga of Saint Olaf, the main body of the special saga by writer and chieftain Snorri Sturluson, which he wrote before the Heimskringla, before the Chronicle of the Kings of Norway. In the great story of Olaf Tryggvason, the story of the king by Snorri is used as a basis, but a lot of material that has something to do with the life and the Christian mission of the king is woven into it. Related versions of Olaf's stories are preserved in other manuscripts as well, but nowhere are they expanded as much as in Flateyjarbók, where whole stories, chapters from stories, and independent episodes are added. Among them, we can enumerate the Færeyinga saga, the saga of the islands of Faroe, the main part of which appears to be in the original form and nowhere else. The Orkneyja saga, the saga of the islands of Orkney, almost complete. And then we also have the saga of the foster brothers, the Fostbræður saga, with sections that are not in the other manuscripts, and also the saga of the Greenlanders, the Grænlendinga saga, which is preserved nowhere else. One of the oldest stories and also one of the oldest records of the discovery of Vinland, one of the 3 territories explored by Scandinavians in North America. Many of the parts of this manuscript are preserved nowhere but here, such as short tales called Satur, the short tale of Einar Sokkason, for example, or of Thorleif, the Earl poet, of Thorstein Oxford, Hroasheimska, and others. In the second part of the book, there are, among other things, stories about King Sverri, who died in 1202, and Håkon the Old, who died in 1263. The saga of King Sverri is the oldest known Norwegian king story. The first part of it, and perhaps the entire story, is written by Karl Jonsson. He was the abbot of Þingeyri. The beginning is written according to Sverri's own foreword. Allegedly, the rest is based on sayings of familiar contemporaries. A church facade depicted in one initial greatly resembles Þingeyri, so this could be the place where it was written. The saga of Håkon, on the other hand, was written by the skilled storyteller Sturla Þórðarson. Between these 2 sagas, much was spent on the manuscript's continuous royal sagas. In the second half of the 15th century, probably at the instigation of Thorleif Björnsson, the herdsman of Reykholar. It was somewhat improved by the fact that stories of others, such as Magnus the Good or Harald Hardrada, the guy who attacked England, Harsh Council, as well as some Icelandic episodes connected to them, were written on the 23 sheets that were added at the back of the original king stories in the book. And speaking of the back of the book, there is also a chronicle that spans over the period from when Julius Caesar became dictator over the whole world, quote, until the year 1394. In fact, a lot of remarkable material has been preserved, which is not available anywhere else, as more effort has been put into its creation than in any medieval Icelandic manuscript. It is considered to be one of the most significant, if not the most significant manuscript of Icelandic literature. For example, it also contains the only one copy of the mythological, the Eddic poem Hindruljóð, considered now part of the Poetic Edda. It's a poem about the goddess Freyja having a dialogue with a prophetess, pretty much paralleling what is happening in the first mythological poem of the Poetic Edda, where Odin has a conversation with the prophetess. The design of Flateyjarbók is such, especially the illumination, that it is unique when it comes to a historical manuscript, which is intended for entertainment and knowledge rather than usefulness in spiritual or worldly matters. It is clear that by the way it looks, it was intended as a showpiece. Flateyjarbók might have been intended as a gift to the boy king Olaf IV, who was named after Saint Olaf and was just 16 years old when Jón Håkonarson began his ambitious project. His paternal grandfather Gissur Galli used to be a member of the Norwegian royal court, so it could have been that he aspired to achieve the same. The idea has been put forward that Flateyjarbók was originally not supposed to contain the stories of more Norwegian kings than the two Olafs I mentioned before, and that the book was actually intended for the third king with this name. But then again, Olaf died as a teenager in 1387, the same year that this part of Flateyjarbók was written, and with him the Norwegian royal line from Harald Fairhair Hårfagra. Flateyjarbók may indeed have only been intended to include 3 sagas, so the sagas of these two Olafs as well as the saga of Eirik the Far-Travelled. They were all crucial to bringing Christianity into Norway. So in these sagas, conversion and paganism are a recurrent theme. In addition to this thematic integrity, the stories indicate the ambition to cover the entire history of Scandinavia afterwards, even though it starts with Eirik. Earlier sagas are also mentioned as if the compilers were conscious of the continuity of the stories, and for instance, through the story of Harald Fairhair, commonly known as the first king who unified Norway, or at least some parts of it, is not told as a separate saga. He is mentioned at the beginning of the saga of Olaf Tryggvason. So we found out that this guy, Jón Finnsson, in Flatey, gave the book to Bishop Brynjolf in 1647, but then the bishop sent it to King Frederick III in Denmark. So full 3 centuries, the book was one of the main objects to be found in the Royal Library in Copenhagen. However, the gift cycle was closed on the last winter day of 1971 when the Danish Minister of Education, Helge Larsen, handed it over to the Minister of Education of Iceland, Gylfi Gíslason. All right, so I hope you found out some interesting things about another Icelandic manuscript. I also have other materials related to this topic. I link them above in the cards and in the descriptions as well. If you're interested in more interesting facts about Viking and medieval Iceland, make sure to hit the subscribe button and